12 today. Yeah. So we're going to do, starting Luke 12:35, towards to the end of the chapter. Yeah, I'll pray for us, and then a couple people can read. Yeah, Jesus, we just thank you for this day. We thank you that we can gather here, Lord, and we thank you for your word, Lord. I just pray that you would speak to us, Lord, and that we would humbly submit to you and to your word, God. And I just pray you would show us areas that we need to change in life, that we need to repent, Lord. Lord, you would help us, bring us more in line with your will. And so, Lord, open up our eyes so that we can see and understand and obey you, God. So, I just pray this and ask this in your name. And so, if I can just get a few readers, if you just want to start in verse 35 and just everyone read a few verses.
I can start.
Yep.
I will also read.
Yeah.
3 seconds.
Stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning. Be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast, so that they may open the door to him at once when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds awake when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will dress himself for service and have them recline at table, and he will come and serve them. If he comes in the second watch or the third and finds them awake, blessed are those servants. But know this, that if the master of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have left his house to be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour you do not expect. Peter said, Lord, are you telling this parable for us or for all? And the Lord said, who then is the faithful and wise manager whom his master will set over his household to give them their portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that servant says to himself, my master is delayed in coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour that he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and put him with the unfaithful. And that servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved the beating will receive a light beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required, and from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more.
I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is finished. Do you think I have come to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, rather division. And from now on, there will be 5 in one household, divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. Jesus also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you say at once, a rainstorm is coming, and it does. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, there will be scorching heat, and there is. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. But how can you not know how to interpret the present time? And why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? As you are going with your accuser before the magistrate, make an effort to settle with him on the way, so that he will not drag you before the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and the officer throw you into prison. I tell you, you will never get out of there until you have paid the very last cent.
So we're just going to do head, heart, hands. What do we learn from this passage?
I feel like this is a weird part of it.
Yeah.
Like what's going on.
Yeah,
Speaking of a lot of weird sayings.
The context?
Yeah, what's going on?
So, last week, I think the main thrust was like money and possessions. So it's like he told the parable of the rich fool, right? Who was storing things up and wasn't generous to God, and then he told us to not be anxious, right? So I guess this is like a block of teaching. It is a little confusing because it seems like, yeah, Luke arranges things very differently than Matthew. This seems, yeah, but now it seems like Jesus has gone into like essentially an end times teaching.
Who is he talking to?
Well, it's clearly, I would say it's the crowds, right? Because Peter asked him, are you telling this parable for us or for all?
But he's like already in Jerusalem, right? So he's talking
No,
to
he's
Jews.
not in
No.
Jerusalem.
He's on, I guess I'll assume he's on his way.
He's on the way.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm my head's stuck.
We
in,
skipped
like,
back
just
or
went- yeah.
forward last week.
That's right. So he's not in Jerusalem.
Yeah, so I assume he's just giving this this teaching to the crowds.
Chapter 12, verse 1, it says, in the meantime, so many thousands of people had gathered together, they were sharing one another. So I feel like there's probably a big crowd around him.
Do we know where he is?
On the way to Jerusalem.
I think I remember in 11. We didn't even know where he was. So he's on his way from where he was to Jerusalem, somewhere in between. He's just dropping truth bombs on everybody. What sort of analysis do we put on this? We're trying to go through. What do we learn about?
Yeah, what do we learn?
all
So
that.
what do we learn about God? What do we learn about people? Or if there are any questions, specific questions?
Well, I was reminded of a conversation I had with Chris, like, I think it was about a month ago. He was talking about how he had they're supposed to have these evaluations for their clinic, where they're supposed to come in and do like health code stuff or whatever. And like, so, you know, when they expect the guy to come, it's like everybody's on their P's and Q's, right? But then, like they hadn't come in forever because of COVID, and then everybody just like quit thinking he was coming. Like, he was, like people weren't acting like he was getting ready to come. And he shows up, and everybody's like, ah, freaking out. Anyway, I get it all in order, but he was telling me about how it's like kind of a parallel for like how we sit around and the Christ is coming any day, Christ is coming any day, and like, you know, when he first says like, you know, when he said it down, I'm sure people were like, oh man, you know, the day's at hand. And then like now, you know, 2,000 years later, like we could be tempted to be like, oh, he might come in our lifetime, maybe. I don't know. But like, you know, he's coming, but yeah, we probably won't see it. Right? And then he's talking about here, like, coming is unexpected. So, you know, and it can come anytime. We're not supposed to. As a, I don't know, a growth tool, a tool of discipline, or even just a testing hearts. Like, are we gonna be faithful, or are we gonna be watchful? Like the disciples in the garden. We're supposed to just keep watch one night. Can't even keep watch for one night. So yeah, our hearts are like the disciples.
Yeah, the main thrust of like the main thrust of the passage is, you must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So that's what Jesus is trying to tell us, is that we need to be ready, right? Because he's going to come in the way, like at a time when we don't expect him to come, and there's going to be people who aren't ready. So I think maybe, we can even hone in, like, how do you, according to this passage, not like elsewhere, but what we see here, how do you think we get ready? How should we be ready?
Dressed for action. Keep the lamps burning.
Like, what do you think that means?
Big front porch light on.
Yeah.
Wear
That's clearly
splits.
an analogy, but yeah.
I mean, when I think dress for action, I immediately think of the armor of God, you know, like in all the parallels there. Of like, we're not just supposed to be sitting around, you know, just waiting passively, but like actively waiting. And so that could be like being obedient to Him, you know, like knowing the Word and using the Word to live our life, I guess. I know the best explanation. But that's what I think of.
I think like verse 45 is pretty helpful. It's like the servant says to himself, "My master is delayed in coming," and he begins to beat the male and female servants, eat and drink and get drunk. So I think it's like there should be like a sense of we should love other people well. I think Matthew 24, I mean, he talks about his coming being delayed. He's like, the love of many will grow cold, and lawlessness will be increased. So I think just simply, it's like we should live holy lives and we should really love other people. Or at least
Specifically his servants. Right, so it says like the master's servants, i.e., like I would even say that's maybe talking about the church, like other believers. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, and I guess I'm like, who are the believers? I guess I don't know. It's fascinating, but like, do you consider people believers who like don't pursue holiness and don't love people? You know what I mean? And he says, he talks about the two, that one servant knew the master's will, and he did these things, and he got a severe beating.
he didn't do them.
He did not. He did the evil things.
He knew the master's will and he did not do it.
Yeah, and the servant who knew the master's will but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a light beating.
So I would say there's three people here.
Yeah.
So there's people who are just know the master's will and they do the complete opposite. They we can look in the church, right? There are clearly people who even abuse people in the church, right? Right, they're given into drunkenness or gluttony or cares of this world. That's one. Two is people who know the will and then don't do it. And then three is like people who just don't know His will and just don't do it.
Yeah.
So would that be like the unreached people, or is that like still believers? Would you say?
Yeah, that's like an interesting question. Is he talking about these three categories of people all unbelievers or all believers? Or the first one is definitely not a believer because they're going to get cast out and cut into pieces and put with the unfaithful.
But they could be like a professing believer.
Yeah. So the
but
first
they know
one's
the Father's will.
definitely not a true believer.
Yeah.
The second and third ones, yeah. If anyone has any thoughts about that.
I can understand these things.
The second one sounds like a nominal believer, right? Someone who knows the will and just doesn't do it. You know, it's not necessarily like the first one who's doing something evil.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's all evil if you're not doing it, but and then the third one, I don't know. I guess I always thought this passage was specifically talking to only believers.
I think in my mind, though, I'm like somebody who didn't know the Father's will. I feel like if you're a believer, you would have to know it.
Well, there would be undiscipled believers, right?
Yeah.
Who just like don't really know the word.
Yeah. I guess I've always thought of it as like unreached people or something. That they die, never hearing the gospel. It's like they're still accountable for disobeying the Lord, but they didn't really know His will, and so their punishment would be maybe less severe. But I have no idea if that's true. That's just how I always thought about it.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I think these are all the master's servants. Right? So like what we call it an unreached people group or someone who knows nothing about God, a servant of the master. Right?
Yeah.
But I think Kiki's right. I think Kiki's hitting at so like even in we can say in our lives, right? Like maybe there was a time in my life like I really didn't understand the importance of sharing the gospel. That no one had really taught me that. So that's like maybe the third category.
I like what he says when he says, everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required, and from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand more. Like, we are responsible for the knowledge that God gives us, right? Like, none of us can say that we didn't know that we were supposed to share the gospel, you or that we were supposed to seek the Lord in prayer. Where somebody who's never been exposed to these things could say that they didn't know that was something Christians were supposed to do.
But it's also interesting, like Peter asked Jesus, but Jesus doesn't give him a clear answer.
Yeah. He
'Cause that's
literally
like-
asked this exact question.
Because that's like we're essentially asking that same question.
Question I have that comes to my mind is, what's the difference between the light and the severe beating? What,
That's what
like, if
Barna knows,
Yeah.
right?
So Barnabas, when we're going to give him spanking.
no, but
Can I get a medium spanking?
no, but seriously, like the light beating and the severe beating, like if you're separate from heaven, like there is no light or severe beating in that. It's one or the other. It's a hard stop. Like what would be the light beating?
Is the light beating going to heaven?
Well, that's what we're discussing.
Yeah.
Well, I think
There's not like layers of hell.
there is a
right?
fourth person here. There's a person that knows he's the wise, the faithful and wise
yeah.
manager, whom the father puts in charge of his household, and comes back and he's ready.
And blessed is that servant.
Yeah.
Right, he gets a reward.
Yeah.
He's going to heaven.
I'm not debating that. I'm debating what's the light and what's the severe beating.
I do remember, like, I think Cleary was teaching once out of Matthew. I'm trying to remember the verse, but we talked about how, like, there's, like, different views of, like, heaven, of, like, you just get, like, more, or you get, like, a higher capacity to, like, enjoy God more.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, maybe someone's capacity is smaller, but, like, they're fulfilled in their capacity, where someone else is, like, more because of what they did on earth. I'm just thinking, is this, like, then, like, the opposite in hell? So, like, people do suffer at different degrees, and whatever they suffer at is enough for them to be suffering.
Well, then you
If
have
it's just like a mirror image.
at the end, 57 through 59, when you have Christ is comparing, the judgment to, like, you're seeing a judge and then you go to jail and you're serving a sentence out, and like you're not gonna leave that place until you've paid the very last cent, which kind of just like suggests there's a set price for like what you owe, that it could be paid over time or something. I don't know.
Can we just give up on these passages?
Right.
It's in the Bible. We can believe it. Let's just move on.
This is like a little thing from this commentary. I'm not saying this is right. Those who knew how to be ready and yet were not will be punished worse than those who did not know and were not ready. So it's almost saying like people who knew the will of God but like grieved the Holy Spirit, and like didn't obey will be punished worse in hell than
I think what I see
the
here,
unreached.
I think
I don't know if that's right.
I think what I see is we have incentive to know God's will for us more fully. Right? We see here not just an incentive to know that God saved us, know that Christ paid our debts, and rest in that, but we have incentive here to more fully know what God's will is for us, so that we can fulfill that and receive a reward in heaven. Right?
I would say the incentive is to obey what you know.
Right.
Not to know more,
But
to do
Or
what
to
you
know-
already
no,
know.
even the servant that didn't know the whole thing
Still received a beating.
That's
still
true.
receive the beating, right? So we
Yeah.
have incentive here, like we are called to try to figure out as much as we can so that we can fulfill it more fully
And obey it.
and obey it.
Because it's worse
Alright.
to know more and then not do more, That's where that big beating comes.
Or is this a picture of what our lives should be like without the intervention of Christ? I don't know.
I think the teaching is to really
Can someone call Matt?
is to know the master's will and to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good, though. I think there's like obviously there's some trickiness to this passage because Jesus is being, in a sense, allegorical or metaphorical or however you want to say it. But like Phil said, like the main point is we know what God has commanded us to do, so let's do it. And people that don't do that, either they're gonna like suffer loss but still enter the kingdom, like Paul says in 1 Corinthians 3, or actually they might just totally be destroyed altogether. Right? And so I think the main thing is like, let's know the will of God and let's do it. That's what Jesus is trying to command people to do.
I think also, like, I see he's also saying, like, don't be like get weary of waiting for his return too. You know, I feel like as believers, especially as we're going through suffering, we can get weary in the waiting for his return. You know, almost like hopeless. So
And even there's like a promise in verse 37. Blessed are those servants who the master finds awake when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will dress himself for service and have them recline at table, and he will come and serve them. So it's like when the master gets home, the master's going to serve the servants, which is kind of a crazy thought. So Jesus is going to serve us.
I think that's like one of the most staggering verses in like the entire New Testament, honestly. Like to think about like when Jesus returns, him like serving us at a table or something. That's just
Well, jumping from that very intriguing passage to the not peace but division.
Yeah.
Yeah, just really light stuff we're into today. But just that in the context, it's all about like relational strife. That Jesus is coming will increase relational strife. You know, that makes me sad.
I have a baptism to undergo.
What's crazy in verse 52, it says, in one house there will be 5 divided. So even the house itself, you know, not just family outside of your house or family, you know, located elsewhere, but family within one house will be divided.
So I guess he's just saying like because of what he's calling us to, gonna create like just a natural division.
Jesus' words divide people, right? In essence, like they're very controversial. We can see that. You know, I was reading John 6 yesterday. He says, "I'm the bread of life," and so then like it's very divisive words. And so I think a lot of Jesus' teachings are extreme in order to divide. Like they do divide people. He wants to essentially not make casual followers but true disciples.
50's talking about the baptism is going to be. I have a baptism to be baptized. Is he talking about he's talking about his suffering, right? It's weird how he talks about his suffering as he's being baptized in suffering.
I mean,
like fully immersed, I guess.
If you think about it, like what does baptism represent?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
us dying.
Yeah,
so it's the same way Jesus died.
Yeah.
It's like the literal baptism.
Yeah.
And it's where he describes it. He's in distress until his suffering is accomplished, which makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
He's ready to get it over with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there
how I wish
baptism?
it were already kindled. What's to bring a fire to the virgin?
Oh God.
And he wishes it was already happening. As he said.
Imagery.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I agree with him. Like, let's take this puppy down. You know, it's time.
Just
But
finish it.
Just wipe it clean and start over like Noah.
yeah.
I think it is interesting if you look at like cultural norms. Like there is like a weird desire in the human heart for like all of this stuff to be erased.
Yeah.
Like you look at all these popular post-apocalyptic films and stuff. Like they like wipe the world clean, start fresh, like try to build something new. Which all of that's based around what human hands can do. There, that speaks like that. Those are popular. If you look at what gets popular in culture, you can see kind of what the human heart is drawn to. Interesting. That's something that resides just in our flesh. But
we know that this is not out of like vengeance, I guess, because
Yeah.
he has compassion. It seems like if you think about like the reward set before him, it's like he hasn't actually received his full reward until he comes back and we are with him. So it's like, yeah, he would want it. I guess it makes you feel hopeful that he wants to like. He doesn't want to dwell on the vengeance and the destruction, but he wants to move on to being with us. I feel like 51 really speaks of, like, I think the idea that, like, you bring earth to heaven, like, where, like, kingdom is already started is, like, true, but some people can take that to, like, the extreme of, like, oh, we need to build this, like, utopia, and it's, like, achievable here on earth. And I think just, like, honestly, the more I live in Memphis, I'm like, I don't think utopia is, like, achievable here, you know? Like, the more that you try, the more that it's divided and crazy. And we as, the actual kingdom is just making disciples. And we try to make this earth as peaceful as it can be in whatever ways that we can, but that's not the ultimate goal.
Well, and if you just think about the violent end that our world is destined for, it's been handed down by God. The world's been judged. The world has. It will meet a violent end.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we do have division with the lost. But honestly, I feel like I see this division a lot in the church, you know? Like, Jesus' words divides the church even, you know? So.
I was actually thinking about that. I feel like it's probably the most awkward and the hardest whenever you're around a Christian that knows Jesus' commands and doesn't want to obey them.
Yeah.
It's like, it really is just a lot of conflict there. I'm not sure that's what he's talking about, but
Yeah, I wouldn't say that was probably his goal in saying that.
it's true.
Well, even just looking at, not necessarily seeing commands, but not wanting to follow them, but just the last passage of, whether you should save or not. Is that specifically retirement? Is that specifically, like college, or is that like college funds, or should we have 6 months in advance? Should we not? Should we, just that whole saving parable, some people interpret it differently. And it's not necessarily, there's multiple interpretations of that command.
So we're gonna skip heart today. So just like we're gonna go to hands. Like, what do we take away, or what do we do as a result of this?
Yeah, I feel like I've talked to a couple about my friend Monica. It's just to me the clearest example of someone knowing and then like walking away from it, but then not really walking away. I would much prefer if she were completely apostate, But it's like it's like you should warn them,
You have something to face.
I think it's just practical. It's just like reminding ourselves, like, what is the will of God? Like in this season of our lives, like how are we being like faithful and wise servants? And so I think like that could even be practically making a list for ourselves. Like, what is God calling us to in this season? To make sure we're actually doing the will of God, doing the will of the Master.
I think, so I've been like reading and rereading the resolutions of Jonathan Edwards. Y'all ever heard of those? So when he was like 19 or something, he wrote down like 70-something resolutions, and they're just like pretty intense. But one of them is, he's like, I resolve to grow in holiness and a knowledge of the God each week more than the last. And I think something like that is very appropriate to this, because Because it's like these people knew the will of God and they slowly just decided not to do it because he delayed in coming. Maybe have like the opposite mentality of like each week I want to like continue to be progressing in my knowledge of God and obedience to what I know is Him.
Yeah, I think we could see where they're like very prominent pastors that start taking advantage of their positions and stuff like that. And I think the sentiment is almost understandable. It's like you serve God, like they might have started out devotion, serving God's will, and then maybe not seeing the fruit that they wanted to see or had expected or something, like when they wanted to see it. And then they get frustrated and they say, well, fine, I'm just going to start serving myself. To be on guard from that as well.
Yeah, maybe not even just like waiting for his coming, his second coming, but just like waiting on the Lord.
Yeah. Or like to see his hand or something, or like see fruit in a neighborhood.
I think there's some way, like, we can, like, remind each other, like, the end. I know, like, in my life, like, I can go, like, weeks or 2 months without thinking about, like, the Lord's return and everything. But, like, if we're constantly starting with the end, it affects how we live now.
Yeah.
But, like, if we're not thinking about it, which is what he's talking about, then, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking about, like, starting at the end and thinking backwards.
Yeah, where are we setting our
But in like a
foundation?
way, like how we are doing that to each other, like reminding each other of like what will happen and the goal of all things.
Hiding the complacency.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
building a building, a structure. That needs to be the foundation. Not only that he said that he's coming back in this world, things like that. That affects how we structure like what we're building. That's supposed to last or something. Because it's not going.
I think yeah.
Can you give a quick, what's the main thrust of 57 to 59?
So yeah, this is a little confusing because like in Matthew, basically this is used at the end. This same thing is used at the end of the anger passage in the Sermon on the Mount. So it's basically it's about anger, but it's also about resolving with your resolving with your brother. So if your brother has something against you, leave your gift on the altar, go. And it says like resolve with him while you're on the way to your court, and it uses this exact same thing.
Yeah.
So that's the meaning of it in Matthew, and so I guess you could say it's like similar meaning, but actually it seems like Luke is using it here. Like once again, if we're thinking like the theme is Jesus is coming back at any time, like I guess like some people I read, they said it was like basically get right with God, right? Like the master, like he's coming at a time you don't expect. So make yourself right with God, because like he's gonna hand you over to the judge, and you're gonna be put into prison, hell, and you're not gonna get out.
That makes sense.
So yeah, so some people
It
think
just was confusing in the context. But
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And so I guess where he says you'll pay the last penny, he's not necessarily saying like eventually you're going to pay everything and get out of hell. He's saying the full amount of judgment that you deserve, you lose.
yeah, I think like this is like a really, weighty passage, and even like honestly, it's kind of hard to understand. I think it'd be good for us to just take a few minutes and just pray, and ask for the Lord's wisdom. Ask that He would show us what He wants us to do as a result of this, and that's going to be like the practice today, for us to just all pray as a group together, popcorn prayer. And just reveal to us. And so I'll start. Chris, you want to close us? Yeah, Jesus, we worship you, God. Lord, we love you. God, we thank you that you've rescued us from our sins, Lord, and that you're our Father, God. Yeah, God, we just pray for wisdom, Lord, because this just it's hard to understand, Lord. I think even in my own heart, I feel it's hard to balance this passage with like also the passages about you being a loving Father. It seems like, yeah, you're a master here, Lord, and I don't. That doesn't always motivate me, God. So please just help me to understand this passage, Lord. Help me to see your heart in this passage, Lord. God, I pray for all of us, Lord, that we would be the type of servants that are doing your will. God, that joyfully want to do your will and are waiting for you to come back, God. So, Lord, would you show us, Lord, would you really show us areas of our life where we're not doing your will, where we're neglecting what you told us to do, God. So yeah, I just pray for that, and I ask that you would show us that and reveal that to us, God.
Yeah, God, I feel like this passage like produces a lot of like fear in me, Lord, and yeah, God, you are worthy to be feared. You are powerful, Lord. You are all knowing. You are in control. But I don't want that fear to drive me or others to run away from you and not do your will, Lord. But I want this fear of, you're going to come back and judge to motivate me to love you more as my Father, Lord, and obey you more because you care for me, Lord. So I just pray, this week or coming months, just in the future, Lord, that we wouldn't allow this, fear of, you coming back, Lord, and your judgment to like drive us away from you, Lord, but drive us to more holiness, Lord, to rightly fear you, Lord, and fear your power, Lord, but also to view your love for us, Lord, and how you've chosen us to be your children, and you want us to become more holy and become more like you, Lord. You want us to be prepared for you to come back, Lord. You want us to receive, many blessings in heaven, whatever that looks like. We might not understand that, but God, you want all these things for us, God. And so I just pray this week, Lord, you would help us not just like walk away from today and never think of this passage again, Lord, but that your spirit would bring these things to mind, Lord, and we'd be able to really like ponder and meditate on these things, Lord, and allow that to change us from the inside, Lord. As I was praying earlier, Lord, I just pray that we would be, people who have a desire to do the right things, but also the discipline to do the right things, God. And I just pray, more than anything, Lord, you would allow this passage to change our hearts, Lord. Change us to desire you more and to worship you more, Lord.
Father, would you help us to know how to encourage and exhort each other, to remember and to think about the end of all things, the resolution of all things, glory that is to be revealed. God, help us to know how to personally and collectively keep your return before our faces in a way that affects and empowers how we live right now.
Lord, we long all the hardships and sins they have and all the hard things are over. We also long to be faithful servants. That when you arrive, you'd be pleased with our conduct and our hearts and how we've loved others and lived sober-minded and holiness. Lord, please make it true of us. That you make it true that we would be your faithful servants, desiring to do your will. us to warn others. You see others of your servants that are just not doing your will, or maybe they don't even know your will. But we warn and encourage and help them. We also just pray for the nations that don't believe, for the still like billions of people that haven't heard of Jesus. God, we pray that you would raise up people to go to them. They would hear the gospel and they would love. Help us to wait for you. In Jesus' name.